astrology provides me a framework for understanding why we are the way that we are, not just reflected back on our own selves, but at the world at large. It helps us to have more compassion for other people when someone's mind works differently than yours, or when someone is attracted to a different aesthetic. A lot of times those things will show up in the chart.
Welcome to Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. I'm Dr. Dan. This show is about making the world a more loving, accepting, and compassionate place, one parent, one person, and one child at a time. The key to raising healthy and engaged kids is for us parents to seek the same in our own lives while striving to be the best versions of ourselves each day. No matter who you are or where you came from, with increased awareness, you can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint for your children, your family, and all those you care about while living your own life to the fullest. Today's show is Family Astrology with our guest, Catherine Urban. With over 12 years of astrological immersion, Catherine's practice is steeped in classical and humanistic techniques. Specializing in forecasting, she empowers her clients to become alchemists of their own charts while gaining confidence and clarity on their path. Additionally, she studies familial dynamics and how shared traits are reflected in the astrological charts of family members. Catherine is the mama of one with one on the way, and she is the author of your astrological cookbook, The Perfect Recipe for Every Sign. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dan. Happy to be here.
So good to see you again. Everyone, Catherine and I know each other because she gave me a wonderful, enlightening reading about a month ago, maybe? About a month ago, which is still lifting me up. As I try to make sense of my place in the universe and where I've been and where I'm going. And after that conversation, I was just so excited to reach out to you and ask if you would come on the show to share your wisdom with our audience who I know will benefit.
Oh, I am humbled and delighted.
So tell us about your road to becoming an astrologer, especially you were that, as I read, you were that astrology girl. Like, this starts early for you.
Indeed. Yes, it does. So my road to astrology, it began as basically a preteen reading horoscope columns in the back of those Teen Beat magazines and realizing that there was something to this. I was intrigued. I was interested. So I bought my first book on sun sign astrology, which also had my moon sign and my Venus sign when I was about 12 years old. Come to find out later that this is actually pretty common. There's a planetary cycle happening at this age of 12. It's a Jupiter return. This planet is associated with expanding our worldview. It's usually around this age of 12 that we start to become more aware of our place in the world or in the universe. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's when it found me. And it wasn't until I moved to New York in about 2007 that I met all these other astrologers who made a lifestyle out of it. And I realized that was available to me. And I dove in. I completely dove in. But, in the larger scope of what it's meant for me, I think astrology is a set of tools and techniques that reflects ourselves back to us. It's one of those systems that is very affirming of our individuality. So a lot of people, no matter how old you are, where you are in your life, when they find astrology, they're usually in a place of seeking like information about like, why are we the way that we are? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that attracts so many to astrology.
And in my experience, the affirming is a great word. In my experience of having readings, I am it's so put at ease. There isn't like a right or a wrong. There isn't there's not this pathology. It's all part of the story, right? It's a very it seems to me a very non-judgmental process and science.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love how you phrase that, Dr. Dan. Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that has helped me as a person in life and as an astrologer is astrology provides me a framework for understanding why we are the way that we are, not just reflected back on our own selves, but at the world at large. It helps us to have more compassion for other people in a
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's mind works differently than yours, or when someone is attracted to a different aesthetic, a lot of times those things will show up in the chart.
Yes, and if only we all could understand this information, because the concepts all resonate with me, and the amount of details. I was reading your blogs, and the amount of detail in in the returns and the risings and the retrogrades, which I want to talk to you about. You know, those retrogrades that everyone is like, oh no, but it's much more than that. How does your brain, was it ever hard for your brain to remember all of these details and concepts?
So it's taken years. It's taken years. I know that's one of the challenges. A lot of new astrologers, we go through this quote obsessive phase where
Mm-hmm.
we want to know it all. And no matter how many books you read, like you're just simply not going to retain it all until you put
Mm-hmm.
it into practice. It takes time, just like anything else, just like probably in your line of work or in someone else's, it takes years to really have a solid grasp, and also your understanding of the framework and the tools are going to continue to grow. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, in reference to what you were saying, sun sign astrology is truly only the gateway.
Mm-hmm.
We are never done learning.
Yeah.
We astrologers, we are all still students. We are never done learning.
I do remember, to your point, it takes a long time to do whatever we do to start seeing all the patterns emerge, and for it to start being going from being very conscious and purposeful to much more natural and flow. And I remember having this one male client, and I'd gotten to know him for a few sessions. And then I said, let me just take a stab at what's going on in your life right now and tell you a little about what I think about some of your characteristics and some of your choices. And I just started to, so to speak, profile. And now I've learned it's really also a little bit of channeling at times too, because I'm very intuitive in the work. And I just rattled this off, and because I had enough of the relationship with him. I said, so just tell me how much of this resonates. He's like, his mouth was just open. He said, man, I thought I was such a unique human being, and you just like called me out and like comment on all this stuff that's going on in my life. And I said, you are unique. It's just there's patterns that emerge. And I have a feeling that's a large part of what you do with this information.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a huge part of um, studying and practicing astrology is understanding cycles. And you have a chart with your sun sign, your moon sign, your Venus sign, Jupiter, everything. And at various stages of your life, those placements are going to become activated. So, for example, we have this planet Saturn, and it travels around your chart about every 30 years. But we have something called the 7 year itch, that's something that we're familiar with in our culture.
Yep.
But that will apply to basically every scenario. If you've been at a job 7 years, if you've been at a job 14 years, if you've been at a job 28 years, that is Saturn interacting with that symbol in your chart. So we do see repetition all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm. I know, and I know from that's just so fascinating to me. I know from my readings when you go back and you look at, oh, well, these are the dates or the years that there must have been major transitioning happening with you at work. And like, lo and behold, it's unbelievable. It's like unbelievable of like, whoa, that was the time we started this, or that was the time we had to transition into this. And it happens. It's it's real.
Yes, and that's just one of the cycles. I often like to think about there's a quote from Ram Dass, the
Mm-hmm. Yes.
spiritual guru,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, and he has a very interesting chart by the way, but he said throughout all of his years of meditation and seeking and spiritual practice, he said, you know, we it's not that we transcend who we are, it's just we get more practice dealing with these pieces and parts that we were born with, something to that
Mm.
effect. That's not a
Yeah.
word for word quote, but that has always stuck with me and resonated with me in terms of this birth chart that we're born with and we get to work with our entire life. It's going to evolve in its expression as we live and grow.
Okay, that's comforting, right? So it's what's expand on that nugget there for us. What so it's more about we learning who we are and learning who we are in this universe, in this place and time.
Yeah. So our chart is we're born and the chart is basically a snapshot in time. However, time doesn't stop when we're born. Time keeps going. And as these different planets and placements in our cosmic blueprint, another
Mm-hmm.
term I like to use for it is I like to think of our birth chart as like a roadmap for life.
Mm-hmm.
And as it gets activated by these various cycles and transits, we're invited to that altar. We're invited to that threshold of spending like more intentional energy and focus on what those planets and pieces represent in our life. And so as we move through life, we're going to return to those areas and our expression and our relationship will evolve.
Mm.
I like to think of again with their birth chart as a blueprint for our life. A lot of my clients, they want to know if they're living their purpose.
Yeah.
And my viewpoint on the whole thing is that if, as long as you are embodying your chart, you are living your purpose. Granted, there are certain pieces and parts of our birth chart that feel more purposeful when we do them. But I feel as if, you know, we incarnated in this lifetime, in this body, at this epoch for a reason. And our purpose is to live out our natal charts to some degree.
I love the idea of a blueprint and roadmap. Love that idea. And you said if we are embodying our chart. So as a listener out there, they're like, how does one embody that? What does that mean? How do you embody your chart?
So, for example, if you have your midheaven, your career point in Aries, there's going to be something within you that knows that you need to be independent in the way that you work. Or maybe you're an Aries sun or you're an Aries moon. There's something about independence that is really, really strong for you. So at a certain point, you may realize, oh, I should probably work for myself. Then you're living that embodiment of your chart. There's a lot of people, you know,
Mm.
we study celebrity charts and it's just remarkable how they have no knowledge of their chart. They may have no knowledge of their chart, but they are living it out so literally.
Mm.
And it's astounding. I'm in awe when I see that.
Do you feel that people like what's the so a lot of people don't know their charts, right? So a lot of people don't know what it is unless you actually have a reading or you've studied it yourself. What would you say, is there a visceral feeling of or feelings of not living your chart? So when people know they're, my terminology, I'd say not in alignment, how do people recognize this? Because to me, for those listening, I think this would be a great trigger to learn more about your chart if you're having some of these feelings.
Yes. So that feeling of not being in alignment, that can come from several different angles. Usually we'll be able to figure that out. Usually we'll be able to figure out where that's coming from. Sometimes people feel out of alignment because, yes, maybe it's what time it is to step into living out this symbol in your chart in a new way. And there can be resistance to that. Sometimes not living in alignment means, not living in integrity with your values. Those values are probably showing up in your chart. Also, maybe the tendency to be in conflict might show up in your chart. For example, I frequently run into people who say, I'm a Leo, but I do not feel like a Leo. Upon further investigation, we may see that Leo sun in a configuration with another planet that might negate that a little bit. Leos are known for their shine, for their generosity, for their vibrance. But, if that sun is in a square to Saturn, there may be some hesitance to shine. So that may be where that sort of comes from too. When we see the relationship between these different planets, that can describe an inner conflict.
And that's where the more that I've learned about astrology, I just have such appreciation for all of the interactions and the subtleties, because this layperson's astrology, people say, oh, wait, you're a Gemini? You don't seem to have two personalities. I'm like, what? I don't like, there's just what you read on the back of a, I don't know, cereal box sort of thing, versus all of these layers. Are there certain things that you look at, because it's so complex? Are there 3 or 4, I don't want to oversimplify this, but main indicators that you look at when you're trying to get one of these like quick reads on people to kind of put them, kind of profile what you're looking at?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So back in the day, it was very common for folks to just know their sun sign.
Yeah.
Very easy to look that one up. Nowadays, thanks to technology, astrology apps, it's much more common for folks to know their big 3. And the big 3 are going to be your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign, also known as your ascendant. And these 3 pieces make up a huge portion of our personality and character. And a lot of people get confused between the rising sign and the sun sign in terms of which one is more important or which one might describe you better, because some people do resonate with their rising sign more than their sun sign. And the thing is that they're both equally important. They are both equally important. So those are the big 3 that we tend to look for in astrology.
And how about, I've learned more and more about north nodes and south nodes, which I have found very helpful to me in my daily life if I feel I'm being pulled into my south node that I've been doing for several iterations and probably lifetimes, versus my north node where my soul is aspiring to be. I find that very helpful.
Oh, yeah. That's one of those placements that we were sort of alluding to earlier around when someone wants to know what their purpose is. A lot of times we do need to talk about that nodal axis and what's going on there. The south node will often describe what's familiar to us, the memories and imprints. Because, if we are under the pretense that we've had other lifetimes, we've had thousands of them. And so that south node is really going to describe not just one past life, but the strongest form of imprint that is sort of informing this lifetime. And then that north node is where we're often, there are exceptions, but often encouraged to get out of our comfort zone and do something brave. So yeah, that North Node is often a huge point of fulfillment for people when they start to explore that.
Mm-hmm. I'm struck by the idea of alchemy and how you talk about helping people become an alchemist in their own lives. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So the alchemist piece comes from the idea that we do have autonomy, the idea that we do have free will, the idea that this wheel on a piece of paper isn't predetermining our every move in this lifetime. So, to be an alchemist of our chart, we're going to talk about those configurations in your natal chart, the ones that are easy and flowing and offering all sorts of gifts and talents our way. We're also going to talk about those challenges, because often with those challenges, we have choices. We have choices over how that energy gets to show up in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be an alchemist, we can work with our natal chart. We can talk about that energy. We can shine light on that energy. And it's often through awareness of ourselves, of our tendency, that then we feel like we can change it. You know, we talk about parenting. I do have a 2-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and naming our emotions, it's such a key component through navigating some of those big emotions. Just naming what's happening in the charter, like you said with your client, just naming it,
Mm-hmm.
it illuminates it in a way that we feel like we have a little bit more choice over how we steer that. The same thing is when I'm telling someone about their forecast, what's ahead.
Mm-hmm.
The way I like to compare it is, I'm telling you that spring is coming. I'm telling you that it's a seed planting time in your life. Or I'm telling you that winter is coming. It's time to hunker down and conserve that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just metaphors for all the different things that life can bring. But I'm telling you what the weather is, and then we can be prepared for what's to come.
And I love the notion of choice. And I think that's just so important for us humans to feel that we have choice, because when we feel we don't have choice or we are trapped, it results with a lot of distress, both in our thinking and in our feelings and in our body. And this is a roadmap. So there's an astrological roadmap, but it is not destiny, as you point out. Like, so we know that spring is coming, and it might be time to start tilling the soil and to plant. But no one's telling you what to plant or necessarily how to plant. Like there is free will. Like, so what does astrology think about the difference between free will and destiny?
Gosh, it is a debate as old as time. So when astrology became a really solid system thousands of years ago in ancient Greece, the popular mindset was Stoicism,
Mm-hmm.
to love one's fate. Back then, our life was our lifespan was a lot
Mm-hmm.
shorter. We had less options for the direction of our life than we do today. So today, I do believe we have so many more choices. But the thing is that with some of these astrological techniques, the way that they sometimes line up, it leaves a lot of us wondering how much is really in control,
Mm-hmm.
in our control, and how much is part of the grand plan. Ultimately, we're humbled because no one really knows. No one really has the answers to these big questions. No one really knows how astrology even really works. All we know is that it does work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like when different readers who didn't know what I did until we started talking would say, yeah, I would say based on your chart, you're definitely in the helping profession. I'd be like, oh gosh, was it that obvious? You know, it's like, did I have a choice in that? Or was that a pull? And even if it was a pull, there's meaning and purpose. And then the question becomes, are we living in purpose based on what our chart is telling us or what we were pulled to do? Or as we are, looking to your services of, hey, this doesn't feel right. Can you help me understand my chart to know what my choices are that might be more aligned with my place in the cosmos?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think those are some of the things that sort of attune us to seek understanding. Is just, who knows? Yeah, there may be signatures in your chart that point toward the helping profession, but you think, oh, I could have done this or I could have done that and still been in a helping profession. But then you go back and you look at what was going on in your chart at those key moments that led you to exactly where you are now, and you wonder.
Yes.
But the important thing is, we do have choices every day, whether those are predetermined or not, right?
Right.
We do. And so that's one thing I like to empower people to do in our sessions, is to say, rain is coming. Do we want to bring our umbrella, or what do we want to do? Do we want to dance in the rain?
Right.
How are we going to do this?
Jump in the puddles.
Yes.
So when did familial astrology become a thing?
Oh, gosh. For me, right away. Because once I started to study my chart, I started to study my family's charts. And I noticed that there were patterns. I noticed that there were definite patterns. And I was curious, is this normal? Does this show up for other people? Or am I this anomaly? Of course I wasn't. Of course, this is very common. It's one of the specialized readings that I offer for folks, is to do a family reading. And we can look at, whoever's in your little unit there. We can look at all the charts. And it's fun. It's fun to identify the patterns. It's fun to see who gets what traits from who. And yeah, it's such a rich field of study, and I think it deserves more attention, because there's so many different variables. Like, for example, you could inherit a placement from a parent, and maybe the quality that is representing. For example, my father and I share the same moon placement to the same degree. Out of 360 degrees in the zodiac, our moons are within 2 degrees of one another. And our moon tells us about our emotional nature, how we act when we're under emotional distress, how we act when we're tired, when we're hangry, when just our environment is not to our liking. That is our moon sign. And so I inherited that from my father. We act the same way when we're in a corner. And we have a very similar nature. My brother inherited his moon from my mother. And they are not exactly alike, but they do each have a way of creating beauty wherever they go. They both have sort of cultivated this beautiful personal world that sort of radiates into their environment and to others. My brother plays music, my mother gardens. And so it's interesting to see how these traits get passed on, because often it's not a carbon copy, but understanding that the essence is similar.
And this is another way of understanding the dynamics you have with these very important people in your life. And I imagine it's knowing what signs you share, knowing what signs or what placements are compatible. I'm sure some are more compatible than others, which could help explain maybe why there's some tension or miscommunication or misunderstanding with certain individuals in a family.
Oh, definitely. And tension can show up both from similarity. Oddly enough, my father and I have had our times. We have the same essence, but it's like, often opposites attract. Often opposites are complementary. So it is possible to see tension arise from too much similarity because, like twins, there is this desire to differentiate. And speaking to what you were saying, Dr. Dan, yes, there very often are configurations between family members that can produce tension. For example, if one child's Mars squares another parent's moon, they're probably gonna get on each other's nerves a little bit there. But maybe there's other aspects that help remedy that and smooth that over. So that's always interesting to look at and understand from that angle.
When I can't remember what age our kids were when my wife started to do deeper dives into this world and learn more about our kids' placements. And it was so helpful that we just, we were happy to have and we're happy to have the information. And we also wished we would have had it earlier. Like some of looking back of different behaviors or different developmental phases. And so many of them, first of all, regular child development, but also made sense with who they were and their placements. And to have that information to just be like, oh yeah, that's that's a Taurus, and that's they tend to do this, and oh, that makes sense, versus that always that what's going on and why are they doing this and why is this a challenge? It just seems like such a useful it's such useful information.
It is. It is. And yeah, there are some astrologers who don't want to look at their children's chart right away because they want to let the child's essence emerge organically without their projection, without their judgment. So don't feel bad that you didn't know sooner. Or you might be someone like me who oh gosh, my friends make fun of me for this. I looked at my daughter's chart as soon as she was born. Soon as she was born.
I would have been that. I would have been like that. Yeah. Yeah.
But I already had the cosmic clock in my head. So as I was like watching the clock, I had a 30-hour labor, by the way. And so I was watching the clock and I knew what sign was rising at that moment. So it wouldn't have been a secret to me. So yeah, I looked at her chart right away. And what I would say to parents, because a lot of parents do this and they get nervous because Dr. Dan, like, as you probably know, there are no perfect charts and there are no perfect people.
No.
And so our charts are going to have really awesome things going on in their makeup and they are going to have challenges. So for a parent who loves their child, wants to protect their child, wants the best for their child, of course we're going to have some level of fear when we see a challenging placement in our child's chart. And so what I always encourage parents to do is to behold your child's chart with curiosity of what this divine being is going to do with this cosmic blueprint. Because some of those placements are yours or your partner's. Some of those placements are original. Not all of our placements get inherited. Some of them are totally unique to who they are. And so be curious over how that chart, how this little being is going to create their own life.
That seems really important to keep the curiosity, as you've said. And we know that with parenting comes a lot of worries. People who were warriors before kids often describe themselves as increased warriors. I know many people who were not warriors before kids, and they're like, how did I become such a warrior? And these days, there's lots of different things to think about. It is a complex world that we're raising kids in. It's an unknown future. And yet, how do we keep that open mind of all of the possibilities that are out there for ourselves, for our kids, and how we can use knowing the blueprint to enhance our parenting, as opposed to, what's the word? It'd be enhance it as opposed to over control it or
Yeah,
limit it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, using it as sort of like a guiding light.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I am in awe of my daughter, who is a Taurus, and she's always been a good eater. She's always been a good eater. And a pretty good sleeper too when she's not teething. And I love seeing her Libra moon come to life. Her Libra moon has always been a good sharer. Her Libra moon, if she has an empty spot on her little plate, she wants something in there because balance is important to her. And so I'm in awe of watching her placements come to life. And yeah, using it as like a guiding post, like, what might she be interested in? Like, I might think with some of those placements, she may be interested in food. She may be interested in art. She may be interested in working with other people one day. And so knowing that, I can sort of say, hey, like, would you maybe be interested in trying this? Or this might be something that you might have fun doing. And yeah, so just being curious, but also just using those placements as sort of inspiration or guidance without trying to force her into them either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about listeners who are already inclined towards astrology and into astrology, or are really interested in. And then there's the concern about a partner who doesn't really believe in this stuff, and very skeptical at minimum to more impassioned. What do you? I imagine you come across couples all the time with different levels of understanding, openness, and acceptance. How do you manage that, and what do you recommend to those couples?
So I think that it can be challenging being in a relationship, when you don't have the same worldview or the same spiritual view. It's a challenge, but then again, that could show up in their astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, I try to understand it through that lens, but also I'm not offended if someone doesn't resonate with astrology. This is
Mm-hmm.
this is an option. This is a tool set. It's not for everyone. Not everyone is going to resonate with it. Just like someone else's practice may not resonate with me. So I'm never trying to force anyone to believe astrology. But what I will say is that a lot of people actually find their way to this path as skeptics. There's a lot of my colleagues
Mm-hmm.
who read a book to try to disprove it, and they're now brilliant astrologers. So
Nice. Nice. I like that. So you never know. You never know what you might stumble upon and what you might be open to.
be open.
Yeah. So there are so many things astrology is used for, and and in your work, relationship dynamics, familial astrology, um, perspective and meaning, and one that really is of interest to me is it horary
Horary astrology.
horary astrology? And you, as leading into that, for you to teach us about that, I loved what you wrote about recently about one of your teachers told you about this, which is one should never ask a question until one is truly ready to know the answer.
Yes. So this is an ancient form of astrology. It's been making a little bit of a comeback. And horary astrology is the art of asking a question. So, for example, if you want to know, will I get the job? Well, when I look at what's going on in your birth chart, I might see that career is a big focus, but I don't know if you're going to get this job, maybe a different job. I don't know. So, if you are asking about this particular job, I can cast a chart to answer that question. And Yeah, but as you were referring to, it's advisable not to ask the question until you are truly ready to know, because these charts, believe it or not, do work. That's
Mm-hmm.
why they've been in practice for thousands of years. And we can actually get pretty specific with them. And actually, this form of astrology is very useful for folks who don't know their birth time. There's a lot of people
Mm.
who their birth time wasn't recorded, or due to adoption or immigration, those records were lost. So, horary astrology is an excellent option to work with astrology to answer big questions in life without knowing your birth chart.
Mm.
It's divination. It's like pulling a tarot card.
And this on a personal experience, you had a personal experience with this recently, which is pretty exciting.
Oh, I did. Yes. Yeah, the full story is written on my blog, but just briefly, yeah, I had wanted to know, will I have a second child? And it was a big debate in my house. And my husband was pretty firm on just having one. And yeah, so I started to accumulate all my daughter's things that she grew out of. It started to just fill her closet. And I got to the point where I hadn't wanted to ask the horary up until this point. I didn't really want to get a no answer. I wasn't prepared to get a no answer at that point. But finally, I got to this point where I was like, am I just retaining all this stuff in her closet to make me sad every time I open it? Or do I need to just get rid of it once and for all? So I had what we call the horary moment, where you get like this burning need to know question. And so I was like, I need to know now. And I cast the chart, and it seemed to tell me that I was already pregnant, which I thought was impossible at that time. But a week later, I took a test, and lo and behold, here we are on baby number 2, and we're
Yeah,
all happy. We're all very happy about it. But
that yeah.
this baby is going to be an Aquarius, like my husband. So there you go, family astrology.
There you go. You're living it. And it is interesting, or fascinating actually, that you had your moment when you were ready. Like, I mean, it would like it came to you that you needed to know, and you were then ready for the answer, which could have been, yeah, you're only going to have one. And prior, as everyone read the blog, you'll learn more, and you'll hear another story in that blog as well, that you had to be ready to hear that, yeah, there might just be one, so you can move on.
Precisely. Yeah, because sometimes people want to know, am I going to fall in love? And where that place is coming from, where that question is coming from, is that they do want to be in love.
Mm-hmm.
So to ask that question, I always recommend to use a time frame. Am I going to fall in love in the next 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
And then that way it leaves the door open. If should that answer be no, you're not going to fall in love in the next 2 years, that it's possible to fall in love 2 years from there. So yeah, you really, and it doesn't mean that you can't fall in love with yourself or something awesome that you've got going on. It doesn't mean that life can't be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think just being ready to hear whatever the chart may say is an important piece of working with that method.
Okay, Catherine. I think I have several more questions in my mind and on my paper here, but we need to go to the parent footprint moment question.
I'm ready.
Okay. Tell us about a time that you became aware of yourself as an individual, as a parent, or even an awareness of your own parents, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your own life, your child, and or those you love.
Yes. So I do just have to shout out my grandmother. My grandmother always made me feel seen,
Mm.
always made me feel special, always listened and entertained my wild ideas as a child. But I think the thing that's really coming to my mind as you're asking me this, Dr. Dan, is that point of recognizing your parents as people. As I mentioned earlier, my father and I, we spent a lot of my teenage years butting heads.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until my 20s, and this is a point in astrology around your Saturn return around the age of 28, when you really do start to see your parents as people. And that's when a huge threshold of healing began to take place and mend our relationship, is that I realized, our parents are human. It's sort of like I shouldn't put pressure on him to be perfect, because none of us are. So that was one way that astrology actually helped to facilitate that big realization. And yeah, and hopefully it won't take too long for my kids to see that too.
No, just about 20 more years, Catherine. That's all.
Yep.
Right around the corner.
Saturn return, but we can wait for that. We can wait for that.
You can wait. There's a lot of other phases coming, good, wonderful phases coming your way.
We'll enjoy them all.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for sharing about your grandmother, grandparents. That's the wisdom and the love that grandparents bring at a time in life when the relationships with their grandkids often look very different than the relationships with their own kids, just because of their different phase in life. And again, grandparents are so, so important.
Magic.
Yeah. Tell us where everyone could not only find all of your offerings, but also your book, and give us a little snapshot of your book as well.
Yeah. So I am the former horoscope columnist for Bon Appetit magazine. So we used to do tasty food horoscopes every month. And from that came the opportunity to write a book, your astrological cookbook. And that is going to give you recipes for every sign of the zodiac. And you can follow those recipes for your signs. You can also follow that book through the seasons of the year, the different zodiac seasons of the year. So there's an intro section which tells you all the ways that you could use that. And where you can find me is my website, catherineurban.com. That's where you can book a reading, find that blog post we were talking about. And I'm also on a lot of socials. I'm on YouTube, and I'm on Instagram, Twitter at Astro Catherine. Sometimes I'm tweeting about being a parent and astrologer. Other times I'm forecasting about the weather. So that's where you can find me and keep up with what I'm up to.
And as someone who has benefited from your services, everyone, you will just be at calm and at ease when you look at Catherine, when you listen to Catherine, when you see her space, which is behind her. I have said that it makes you feel at peace in the cosmos talking to her.
Aw, thank you, Dr. Dan.
That's it, everyone. So much mystery and curiosity in the universe, and so much possibility. And we have to keep remembering about the possibility and the different iterations and cycles of our lives, and do your best to lean into them. We so appreciate your 5-star reviews, for being a part of our community, for sharing this episode with everyone you think will benefit. You know what I'm going to ask you to do. 2 things. Try to be the person you want your child to become, and ask yourself the guiding question I ask myself each day: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Strummer Man, composed and performed by Pro Tunes. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.